and you just in such a rush because you're late for your destination or whatever, you filled it with fluid, put it on, and gave it 2 twists, but you didn't hear this sound. You hear that sound? That's tight. What's gonna happen? You're gonna get on the road. That cap's gonna bounce and it's gonna come off. And now, because of the pressure is gonna build up, that fluid's gonna flow out. As you continue to drive, it's gonna drop. You're not gonna see it. But once it gets below a certain level, this sensor is gonna let the engine know, and something's gonna register that you're low on fluid. When you start overheat, when this thing starts to run low and it's gonna start overheating, now you got a big problem. Because not only are you low on fluid, you don't have a cap. And they don't replace caps at every truck stop. So now you got a big problem. So every time you do your under the hood, you wanna make sure your caps are tight. I'm just throwing that in there. Also, you wanna make sure that these caps are tight. Because what a big problem with this oil, when we add oil, we don't add quarts, we add gallons. If your fluids is low, it ain't gonna ask you for a quart like a car. It's gonna ask for 2 gallons or more sometimes. And so what happens when we do our pre-trip and we go to check it, knowing that we drive, let's say 1,000 miles every other day, or we do miles, we run through states in a day. So you always wanna make sure that this top is secure by pushing it down and tightening it. Make sure this dipstick, when you pull it, check it, tight, or put it back and pull it out and check it again. Make sure it's tight, because all of these caps, when they're not tight, the pressure builds up, they pop out. When they pop out, you lose pressure. When you lose pressure, you start having mechanical problems. When you have mechanical problems, you'll have breakdown. When you have breakdown, it's a major problem, because now you got to call a tow truck or a company to come and fix it. And you don't move. You don't get paid. So you need to stay on top of that. All right, now we're gonna do, I had to say that because a lot of guys just overlook stuff like that, but it costs you. This is your washer fluid reservoir. This is where you check it, where you fill it. It's secure. You wanna touch your hoses. Make sure that they're tight, not loose, and not dripping or leaking anywhere. Since I'm touching hoses, don't be afraid to touch them. They're not so hot that you can't touch them. This is your radiator reservoir. This is where you fill it. This is where you check it. This is running low. You can add about 1/2 gallon. I want to make sure it's secure. This is your, see, that's loose. You want to make sure that that's tight, because as you ride and this falls off, you're going to get a reading inside as if something's wrong. It's nothing wrong. It's just that this fell off, as you can see. So that's why we do pre-trips. That's your sensor to let you know when this is running low. It'll let you know inside. This tube right here is your intake output for your turbocharge. It has to be big like that because that baby breathes. That's what gives you the power for pulling. This turbocharger. This is what gives you the added power to pull heavy loads. This turbocharger is secured, and you want to make sure you can touch it. Staying midway right here. This bracket right here, this is your cab mount. This is what secures your cab to keep you from bouncing as much as you would without it. Staying midway right here, this is your alternator. This is belt driven. It's secure. Make sure when you touch the belt, this should be no less than 3/4 of an inch of play on this belt. It shouldn't be shiny. It should have no cracks. Staying right here off this radiator reservoir, you see this hose? This hose runs down to the water pump. And if you look in the back there's a water pump. That water pump is gear driven. And normally when you step outside your truck and you do your pre-trip, you want to look, make sure you don't see no leaks in that area, because if so, it's a water pump problem. You don't want that. Staying midway right here, there's a bar right here. If you follow it, it goes to the radiator over to the frame. This is your radiator support bar. Staying midway right here, if you notice, I don't know if you're looking, this is your oil. This is where you would add oil. This is where you would check your oil. And as I mentioned, to check your oil, you want to do that in the morning, and then midway on your way to your, like if you really when you start your day off and you get ready to look at your paperwork, and if you're going from Connecticut to, let's say, Texas, Texas is like 2,800 miles away. That's a nice 4-day ride, 5-day ride. Every so many miles, every 500 miles, or every time you fuel up, you want to check this to make sure it's a good level. Pull it out, wipe it off, put it back in, pull it out just to get a good reading. Boom, put it in, make sure it's twisted tight. Staying right here, you got a tractor frame. Make sure that there's no illegal welds, no cracks, no dents to that frame. Right here, you got a shock absorber. Touch it, squeeze it, pull it. Make sure it's not leaking. Make sure there's no side-to-side movement. Staying right here off this tractor frame, over here, you have a spring hanger. There's multiple nuts and bolts. You want to touch all of them, make sure all of them are tight, secure. Spring hanger is secure. Looking off the spring hanger, you got leaf springs. You got 2 of them. None cracked, none missing. What supports the leaf spring is the U-bolts. You got 2 of them. Make sure that they're secure. They appear to be secure because I'm not reaching in there, but you can look at them. So now that I'm in here, looking down here off this tire, you have a tie rod in. That's what secures your control arms. You got a tie rod in with a castle nut. That's below this brake cam, but it's down below. Now coming up here, I have air hoses that go to the brake cam. This skinny line right here is your ABS. This fat line is your brake air line that goes to your brake cam right here. This round cylinder is your brake cam. This right here is your brake clamp. This is what secures the brake cam. Reaching inside here, you got a slack adjuster. This is your slack adjuster, and this is your push rod. Your push rod goes in and out, and it should have, if you pull on it, you should have no more than 1 inch of pull. Looking inside your drum, you should have brake pads. The lowest you can go on a brake pad is no less than 1/4 of an inch, no separations. And then inside your brake cylinder, there should be no contaminants, no moisture, no debris. Looking also on your rim, there should be no illegal welds to your rim, no cracks, no dents to the inside of this rim. Looking at the inside of this tire, there should be no cuts, cracks, or abrasions. Coming to the top of this tire, you want to look at your tire depth on your steer tires, because they should be no less than 4/32 of groove tire depth, evenly worn. Looking at the outside of this tire, you want to make sure there's no cut, cracks, or abrasions to this tire. The integrity of this tire should always be almost new, because everything rides on these steer tires. Looking at these rims, you want to make sure there's no cracks, dents, or welds to this rim. Making sure all your nuts are secured. Going to your hub, you want to touch it. Make sure there's no leaks, no moisture. Make sure that all the nuts to the hub seal are secured. Looking at this is where you check your hub seal lubricant, and then there's a cap right here if you should have to fill your lubricants. Now you want to rub your fingers and look for this metal stem, which is where you would put the air inside this tube. It should be a metal stem, not bent, and it should have a metal cap on it. Now you want to kick this tire for wobbleness to make sure that it's not loose. I don't know how that does it, but for whatever reason you want to kick it, but you need to check for pressure with a tire gauge. That concludes this side. We're going to walk around to the other side. Alrighty then. Now, on this side, we're going to start from the top and work our way down. When you're doing your underhood, you want to listen for any unusual sounds. And if you did hear any, it would come from this area, which is where your air loss would come from, because you have a compressor there that builds air up into these lines over here. I don't hear anything, so I guess we're all right. Right here, I've learned, is your air filter support bracket. Something new to me. So I'm gonna pull on that. That supports this. Right in this area is your air lines that feed air to your gauges inside, as well as all your wire harnesses. This right here is your circuit breaker or your panel box or your fuse box. These are your wire harness that feeds all your electrical. This is your air filter. This is where you would check it, or if you pull this off, you would change your filter, but we don't do that as drivers, the mechanics do it. And here you would look for like leaves or any kind of debris. You want to keep that clear. Staying as high as I can. This right here is your power steering reservoir. Again, if anything that has a top, you want to unscrew it, check it, put it back on. That's where you would fill it, and this is where you would check it. Make sure it's not leaking. It would show moisture, but leaking meaning drips from below the hose. Anytime you see drips from below the hose, that means that this thing is actually leaking. But to see moisture does not necessarily mean it's leaking. All right, staying midway right here. This compressor, that's for your AC. I tell you, when you go to California or Texas or any of those hot climate areas, you want to make sure that that baby works, because that's the only thing that's going to give you life inside your truck. So this is your AC compressor. It's belt driven. When you touch this belt, make sure that there's no shiny spots. Make sure it's not separating, cracked. And if the tension, if you push on it, it should be no less than 3/4 of an inch of tension. Staying right here in the middle, if you look back there, there's a square box. That square box is your compressor for your brakes, to give you air to make sure you can stop this truck. That square box. And behind that box, there's a round cylinder, which is your governor. That's what kicks out or regulates anything over 120 psi. When that compressor builds air up, it stops or it kicks out anything above 120 psi, which is the governor. The governor does that. These are your lines for your power steering, but your power steering box is in the back. This is your power steering fluid. Power steering is in the back. Staying right in here, if you look, as a matter of fact, to the back, you see the white, look like a bone. That's your that white thing in the back. That's your cab mount. You have two cab mounts, one on the left, one on the right. Staying right here, this is your gearbox. This is your gearbox. The pole in the middle here, this is your steering column or steering control arm, or no, steering shaft. This is your steering shaft, and it goes down to this gearbox. Right here we have a pitman arm. The pitman arm is secured by a castle nut and cotter pin. If you look at that, this right here is your castle nut, and this thing right here is your cotter. This is your castle nut, and this is your cotter pin. This right here is called anybody want to help me?
Drag link.
This is called a drag link. Great. Looking in the back here, since we're in this area, that's another leaf spring, spring hanger. You have to have all the nuts, make sure that they're all secure. Looking below your leaf spring hanger is leaf springs. You got two, none cracked, none missing. Looking right ahead there's a tractor frame. Make sure that the tractor frame is not cracked, dent, or have any illegal welds. Looking to the midsection of your tractor frame, you have a shock absorber. You want to grab that, make sure it's not moving, make sure it has no moisture. Looking below that, this drag link goes to a tie rod, and it's connected by a castle nut, and a cotter pin. Looking over here in this brake area, you see two lines. One air line goes to the brake cam, and the other skinny line is your ABS line. And that goes to this brake cam and brake clamp. Looking at the brake cam and the brake clamp, this is what is secured by this slack adjuster and this push rod. The push rod has it shouldn't be bent. It should be able to go in and out 1 inch, no more than 1 inch. Looking inside your brake drum, you should have a brake pad. Looking at the brake pad, the less you can go with your brake pad is no more than 1/4 of an inch. No separation in your pad. Looking in the inside of your rim, there should be no cut, crack, no illegal welds, no dents, no cracks to your rim. Looking at the inside of your tire, there should be no cut, cracks, or abrasions. looking at the coming to the surface of your steer tires, they should be no less than 4/32 of tire depth, evenly worn. Looking at the outside of your tires, the outside should have no cuts, cracks, or abrasions. And then looking at your rims, you want to make sure that you look at them and show no cracks, no dents, and no illegal welds to the rim. Looking at all your nuts, you want to touch them. All your nuts should be secure and tight. Looking for rust showing signs of slippage. Looking at your hubs, so you want to touch them, make sure that there's no moisture. All your nuts, you should be able to touch them, make sure that they're all secured. This is your hub seal. This is where you would check it. This is where you would fill it. Now you want to run your hand around the rim, make sure that you can find your valve. Your valve is right here. It should be metal, not bent, and it should have a nut so you can keep a cap on it. Now you want to come to the top here, kick your tire, make sure that it has enough air in it, and the only way you can really do that is with having a tire gauge. Most companies always provide you with a tire gauge to make sure you got proper inflation on your tire.
We need to pull that out on the test tire gauge?
No. That you only get a gauge when you get with a company, and they give you a tire gauge, they give you a map, they give you a pre-trip paper, you know, certain stuff that you need to have. Now, when you do your in-cab test or in-cab inspection, when they talk about bulbs and fuses, your fuses go here. In most cases, there's another panel inside for your gauges on your truck. Hopefully you won't have to go through that, changing fuses, but if you should ever have to, this is where you would look first. And then, you know, when it's talking about bulbs, in most cases, these are the bulbs you're going to be changing, and they're your high beam, low beam. High beam and low is one bulb. And what it does, you unscrew this and push down on it, pull it out, and you just change this whole unit right here by unclipping this right here, put in a whole new unit, put it in, push down and turn it. So that's what you be changing whenever they say bulb, when you're in your in cab and talk about bulbs and fuses. This is where my spare bulbs and fuses. That's the bulb you'll be changing. I've never had to change too many of any other bulbs, but that does happen, and it is up to you when that goes out for you to change it. And in most cases, you'll either see that go, you'll see it out when you do your pre-trip, or somebody else will notice it go out and they'll wave at you or might pull you over and ask you tell you your bulb is out. But you're not gonna get a ticket, but if it's out and someone pulls you over and lets you know, it's your job to change it. You don't call maintenance for that. All right, that concludes Under the Hood. Let's do a quick walk around, because